Hi. My name is Sloane Hart. I'm 29 years old, and last month I ruined a wedding. Not just any wedding. My best friend's wedding. The same best friend who slept with my fiancé behind my back. I watched her glide down the aisle in that perfect white dress, smiling like the saint she pretended to be. She had no idea that in a matter of minutes I'd shatter her perfect little fantasy in front of every single person she loved. You think you've heard revenge stories before? Well, you haven't heard mine. So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, you're going to want to hear every word of this. Because the moment you think you know how it ends, I'll twist the knife one more time. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and join our family of thousands who love a good revenge story. Tap that like button if you believe betrayal deserves payback. And while you're here, drop in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see our family lighting up the map. Right. Let's start at the very beginning. The day I found out the people I trusted most were the ones destroying me from the inside. My name is Sloane Hart. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how my life fell apart in one afternoon. And how, without anyone realizing it, I began planning the sweetest, coldest revenge I could imagine. I didn't always think of myself as someone who could destroy another person's life. I wasn't a schemer. I wasn't bitter. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd have said I was one of the luckiest women alive. I had a stable job I actually liked, a fiancé who could make me laugh even when I wanted to cry, and a best friend, my sister in everything but blood, who'd been by my side for over 15 years. Her name was Talia, and if you'd met her back then you would have loved her instantly. She had this effortless charm, the kind that made strangers spill their secrets to her in checkout lines. We were inseparable. High school, college, moving into our first apartments, she was always there. We'd stayed up talking until sunrise, nursed each other through heartbreaks, even shared clothes and makeup like we were still 16. And then there was Ethan. Tall, dark-haired, with this crooked grin that made my heart flip when I first met him. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 1. He proposed to me on a crisp October evening in the park, leaves crunching under our feet, the air smelling like cinnamon from the street vendors. I cried so hard he laughed through his own tears. He made me believe in forever. That's what makes this part so hard to tell. In the months leading up to that day, life felt like a movie montage. Ethan and I were apartment hunting for when we'd be married. Talia was helping me plan the wedding, taste-testing cakes, flipping through bridal magazines with me on Sunday mornings over coffee. We'd joke about her being my unofficial maid of honor, even though the official title belonged to my cousin. She didn't seem to mind. In fact, she seemed almost too invested. And now, looking back, I can see the tiny cracks in the picture-perfect frame I was living in. It started with little things. Ethan's phone lighting up at odd hours, and him flipping it face down without even looking. Talia canceling plans with me because she was exhausted from work, only to post stories from some wine bar an hour later. Once I'd left my jacket at Ethan's place, and when I went to pick it up he was freshly showered, but claimed he'd been home all day. I remember asking him jokingly, "What's her name?" and laughing. He laughed too, but just a little too long, a little too forced. At the time I pushed the doubts away. I told myself not to be paranoid. Not to ruin a good thing with suspicion. Because that's what trust is, right? Choosing to believe the people you love, even when something feels off. Then came that afternoon. It was a Thursday, late spring. I'd been at the office, counting down the hours until the weekend, when my manager surprised me. She told me to take the rest of the day off. Go enjoy the sunshine, Sloane. I remember stepping outside into the warm air, the kind that smells faintly of cut grass and fresh rain. I stood there for a moment trying to decide what to do with my unexpected freedom. I could have gone home, met a friend for lunch, gone shopping. But then I thought of Ethan. He'd been working from home that week. Maybe I could swing by, surprise him with his favorite pastry from the bakery near his place and spend the afternoon together. It felt like the kind of spontaneous, romantic thing couples do. So I bought the pastry, a warm almond croissant dusted with powdered sugar, and headed to his apartment. The elevator ride up to the 12th floor felt longer than usual. I hummed to myself, clutching the little paper bag. When I reached his door I was about to knock. But then I remembered I still had my spare key from when I used to crash there on weekends. I slid it into the lock, smiling to myself at the thought of his surprised face when I walked in. The click of the door opening felt like a little drumbeat in my chest. The apartment was quiet. No TV, no music. But I could hear something. Faint. Soft. Like muffled voices. And then, a laugh. Not Ethan's laugh. Her laugh. Talia's. I froze in the hallway. My brain scrambled for a reason. Maybe she was just visiting. Maybe they were planning something for me. Maybe. Then I heard it. The sound of a kiss. Wet, unmistakable. Followed by a low moan. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might actually collapse. I stepped forward without even realizing it, drawn by some sick gravity, until I was standing in the doorway of Ethan's bedroom. And there they were. Ethan, shirtless, his hands on her hips. Talia, in a black lace bra I'd seen before, because she'd worn it on a girls' trip and bragged about how it made her feel dangerous. Her lipstick was smeared. His hair was a mess. The almond croissant in my hand felt absurd, like some cruel joke. Neither of them saw me at first. I just stood there, gripping the paper bag so hard the grease spots bled through. The smell of Ethan's cologne, mixed with Talia's floral perfume, hit me like a slap. Then she saw me. Her eyes widened, her mouth opening just slightly. Ethan turned, and for a split second his face went pale. He started to say something, my name maybe, but I didn't hear it. Because in that moment the blood in my ears roared so loudly it drowned everything out. I felt my cheeks burn, my hands shake. My vision tunneled. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the pastry at them. I could have asked why. But instead I just turned around. I walked out of that apartment as quietly as I'd entered, the door clicking shut behind me. My legs felt like lead as I made my way to the elevator. When the doors closed, I finally exhaled, a shaky, broken sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. And right there, between the 12th and 1st floors, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. I was going to smile the next time I saw them just to keep them comfortable. Because comfort makes people sloppy. And sloppy people don't see the knife until it's already in their back. That was the day my world cracked. And the first day of the plan that would ruin hers completely. I woke up the morning after I found them together and stared at my own face in the mirror for a long time. My eyes were puffy from a night with no sleep. My jaw ached from clenching it. I practiced a smile. Not the easy one I used to give without thinking. A different one. Softer at the edges. Harmless. The kind you wear when you do not want anyone to ask what is wrong. I told myself a single rule. I would not slip. I would not cry in front of them. I would not raise my voice or hint at what I knew. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. I would be the best friend any bride could ask for. I would be the sweetest fiancé anyone had ever seen. I would be so gracious it would lull them to sleep. Comfort makes people sloppy. And sloppy people leave evidence. The first test came quicker than I expected. Talia texted me before noon. She sent a photo of a bouquet she liked and asked if I could come with her after work to meet the florist. I typed back that I would love to. I added a heart emoji. My hands shook as I sent it, but my face in the mirror stayed calm. That was the mask. I pressed it on and walked out the door. At the florist, she drifted between peonies and garden roses like a girl in a dream. She held swatches to the petals and asked my opinion on ribbon. I told her the pale blush looked better than the bright pink. She beamed, hooked her arm through mine and said I always knew exactly what suited her. I watched her from the side, close enough to smell her perfume. She was glowing. Not bridal glowing. Something else. It made her eyes glitter in a way that made my chest feel tight. When our meeting ended, she hugged me. Her hair brushed my cheek. She told me she could not do any of this without me. I placed a hand on her back and told her I loved her. Came out smooth. Tasted like metal. That night I started a folder on my laptop called Vendor Quotes. Inside it I made subfolders. Photos. Messages. Audio. Receipts. I copied my phone to my computer, then to an external drive, then to a cloud account I had created with a name that looked like a random string of letters. I knew if I told anyone what I was doing, they would either try to stop me or try to help in a way that would get messy. This was mine. It had to be clean. 2 days later I met her and the bridesmaids for a dress fitting. The boutique smelled like steam and new silk. The consultant clipped the back of a gown and guided her onto a pedestal in front of a mirror that went from floor to ceiling. When the curtain pulled open, everyone gasped. She did look beautiful. Simple satin that fell like water. A row of tiny buttons down the spine. A veil that blurred her edges and made her look softer than she really was. "Hold the veil," she said, and I stepped behind her. I placed each comb tooth with care. My hands were steady because I had practiced. The consultant asked for phones to take a few photos for alterations. Talia handed hers to me while she adjusted the bodice. The screen lit up in my palm. A message preview slid into view at the top. It showed only a name and part of a sentence. Case like. I pressed my thumb to the side button and handed the phone to the consultant. Do you mind? I said. I want to be in the photo with her. The consultant smiled, oblivious. The other bridesmaids chattered about shoes and shapewear. I smoothed the veil. Kept my breath even. The mask stayed on. That night I opened Ethan's laptop while he took a shower at my place. He had never been careful about passwords and I had never needed them before. He used the same one for everything, a fact I had always teased him about. The laptop was unlocked. I opened the Messages app and saw his conversation list. I did not click anything. I took a photo of the screen with my phone instead. Then I closed the laptop and set it exactly where it had been. When he came out, water still clinging to his shoulders, he wrapped his arms around my waist and kissed my temple. He asked if I wanted to order Thai or sushi. I said sushi and rested my head on his chest just long enough to memorize the shape of him without letting myself feel anything. I stepped back and asked about his day. He told me a story about a tedious meeting. He did not mention the middle of the day when he had been busy being someone else's secret. He did not mention how good he was at lying. I watched his mouth move and nodded in the right places. Later, when he fell asleep, I turned my face to the ceiling and kept my eyes open until morning. The bridal shower came on a sunny Saturday at Talia's aunt's house. There were mason jars with lemonade and tiny sandwiches cut into perfect circles. I helped load the favors into a basket and moved through the crowd like a hostess. People smiled and touched my arm. You two have been friends forever, they said. I told them yes, since high school. I told the story about the time we got locked on the roof of our dorm and slept under my hoodie under the stars. They laughed. Talia looked at me with soft eyes as if I had just handed her a gift. We played a game where you guess facts about the bride. Favorite movie. First job. First crush. I wrote answers that were correct for the girl I used to know. The announcer read off the right ones and the room cheered. In the corner, Ethan sent me a text to ask how it was going. He claimed he had stayed home to catch up on work. I took a picture of the room, filters of light through leaves, and sent it to him with a heart. A minute later he replied with a selfie of his laptop and a coffee mug. He looked tired and handsome and faithful. My stomach turned. After cake, while Talia opened gifts and everyone watched, I slipped into the kitchen and left my phone recording on the counter behind the stack of plates. 2 minutes later, I heard the sliding door from the patio open. Voices spilled in. Her voice. Then another I could not place. They spoke in low tones. I kept my back to the doorway and rinsed a dish that was already clean. When I finally retrieved my phone and ended the recording, my hands were dry. The mask was steady. Later that night I scrubbed the audio in a free editor, lifting the hum out of the background, nudging volume on a faint sentence that sounded like we should not do this again. The other voice laughed and said, we keep saying that. There was clink of glass against glass. She said, not tonight though, promise. I listened twice. Then I moved the file into my folder and labeled it with a date. At the same time I made sure my face online reflected nothing but love. I posted a photo of us as teenagers with chipped nail polish and tangled hair and wrote a caption about how I could not wait to watch my best girl walk down the aisle. I tagged her. She commented with a string of hearts and a line about how lucky she was to have me. Ethan liked it within a minute. The rehearsal dinner was at a bistro with candlelight and a chalkboard menu. The groom's name was Grant, and if you had not known anything, you would have liked him right away. He had an open face and an awkward laugh when he got nervous, which happened when he gave a toast and his hands shook. He talked about the first time he met Talia, how she ordered a burger with extra pickles and corrected the waiter gently when he forgot, and how he fell for her kindness. The room smiled. She dabbed at her eyes and squeezed his fingers. I watched her look at him. I tried to see if there was guilt there. If there was, she hid it well. She was all warmth. She was all devotion. She was everything a bride should be if you were squinting. When she looked away, her eyes brushed past me and landed on Ethan at the bar. He had come late, claiming a deadline. He lifted his glass and tipped it toward her. It was almost nothing. You would miss it if you were not looking for it. But I was looking. And something inside me went very still. I told a story when it was my turn. I kept it light and funny and just a little sentimental. I reminded everyone of the year we moved to the city and bought a second-hand couch we had to carry up 4 flights because it would not fit in the elevator. I made people laugh at the part where it got stuck on the landing and a neighbor offered us a saw. I mentioned the way Talia always found the bright side even when everything was wrong. I did not say that sometimes she would say things like it is not that serious, and you would ignore the feeling in your stomach because she made the room feel warm and you wanted that warmth more than you wanted the truth. When I sat down, Grant's mother touched my arm and told me what a gift it was that her son was marrying into a circle with a friend like me in it. I thanked her. My throat felt tight. On the other side of the room at the bar, Ethan set his empty glass down. Talia slipped into the hallway toward the restrooms. A minute later he followed. I waited 10 seconds, then stood and moved casually after them. The hallway turned at a small service door that led to a storage nook. I did not go around the corner. I stopped where the light turned dim and kept my face pointed toward the framed black and white photos on the wall. In the soft echo of that narrow space I heard them. She told him this was insane. He told her it was one more time. She said she could not risk everything. He said he missed her. A chair scraped somewhere in the dining room and laughter swelled and spilled back like a wave. When the door swung open and they stepped into the hall, they encountered me standing at the photograph of a turn-of-the-century streetcar. I smiled. They have great photos here, I said. You should see the one of the old market. I moved past them without looking up. My hands were steady. The mask was perfect. By then my folders were filling. Screenshots of late-night messages. A rideshare receipt on his card that ended near her building at midnight on a Wednesday. A hotel charge from a place across town on a day when he had told me he had a client meeting that ran long. A photo I took outside the hotel from my car, where I watched them exit through the side door half an hour apart. He wore a cap pulled low. She tucked her hair under a scarf. Amateur moves. I did not need all of it. I wanted more than enough. I wanted redundancy. I wanted something that could stand on its own if everything else failed. Something they could not explain away as old or innocent or forged. I kept collecting and I kept playing a part. I volunteered to handle the memory slideshow for the reception. I told Talia that she already had enough to worry about and that I would collect photos from her family and friends. She thanked me with tears in her eyes and hugged me until my ribs protested. It gave me access. People sent me albums. Childhood birthdays. College parties. First vacations. I built the slideshow late at night, choosing softly lit transition timings and songs that she loved. I saved a version with nothing but sweetness. I saved other versions too, and I stored them far away from the first. I offered to print the vows for her and for Grant on nice card stock. She teased that I was spoiling her, and asked if I could also look over the table place cards when I had a second. I told her I would handle it. It let me learn details I needed without having to ask twice. It let me spend time with the coordinator and the DJ under the cheerful excuse of being a helpful friend. I learned who set up the projector, who kept the mics charged, how the slideshow files would be delivered. I asked questions other people never think to ask. I wrote the answers down in my head and smiled at everyone and told them how grateful we all were for their work. I left cookies on the coordinator's desk. Her name was Priya and she was kind. Kind enough that if she ever found out what I had really been doing, I hoped she would forgive me someday. Each time I saw Ethan and Talia in the same room, my body reacted like it was bracing for a blow. My neck tightened. My palms grew damp. I kept my face exactly as it needed to be. I learned to breathe through the feeling. In the car after each event I let my head fall back and allowed myself 60 seconds to feel whatever tried to break the surface. Then I put it away and turned the key and drove home. People notice what you show them and ignore what you hide well. It still amazes me how easy it was to exist like this for weeks. A smile here. Thoughtful text there. I sent Talia links to brunch spots for the morning after the wedding. I sent Ethan a video of a dog riding a skateboard and he sent back a string of laughing emojis and said we should get a dog after the wedding. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed that I would love that. I added a paw print. He hearted it immediately. I went to the sink and ran the water until it was cold and then held my wrists under it for as long as I could stand. The week of the wedding, the air in the city turned heavy and restless with summer. Storms bloomed in late afternoons and cleared by evening, leaving everything smelling like wet concrete and jasmine. My sense of time began to change. Everything I did felt like a bead I was threading onto a string that led to a single knot. I moved slower, but my thoughts were sharper. A hummingbird mind focused only on one flower. On Tuesday I met Talia at the nail salon. We picked pale pink for her and a soft neutral for me. She asked if I was excited. I said I was. She said she could not believe how fast it all came together. I told her it was because she knew what she wanted. She smiled at that. She said she was glad I had forgiven her for bailing on me so much lately. She said she felt like a bad friend. I squeezed her fingers and told her she was perfect and that I understood. In her eyes there was a flicker, just for a second, of something that might have been shame or might have been triumph. It was gone before I could name it. On Wednesday I took a long lunch and stopped by the venue to drop off the printed programs. Priya walked me through the final layout. Round tables like islands under strings of lights. The projector and screen tested and ready for the slideshow. The DJ booth tucked along one wall. There was a final walkthrough with the staff and I stayed for it, nodding when she asked if the order of events looked right. She asked if I wanted to test the mic while I was there. I said sure and spoke into it, pretending I was only imagining the sound reaching the edges of the room. Hello, I said, and there I was, magnified, carried by steel and cable and electricity. I looked at the tiny red light at the base of the mic and thought about how small things become powerful when they are connected to the right system. On Thursday night the bridesmaids gathered at Talia's apartment to pack overnight bags for the hotel where we would all stay before the wedding. There were snacks and the kind of giggling that comes from nerves. The playlist was our old one from college. When Mr. Brightside came on, someone shouted about fate and everyone danced on the couch for a verse before we collapsed breathing hard. I had brought a small gift for Talia. A silk robe with her initials embroidered near the heart. She put it on right away and posed for photos and posted one to her story with a caption about final countdown. She tagged me and added a crown emoji. My phone buzzed 5 seconds later with a message from Ethan reacting to her story with clapping hands. I stared at the little icon of his face next to his reaction and felt something old in me die cleanly and without sound. At midnight the others drifted into sleep in a half circle of blankets and pillows on the living room floor. I sat up in the kitchen with the lights dimmed and offered to finish the place cards because I said I was too wired to sleep anyway. I could hear the soft rise and fall of their breathing. The city murmured outside. On the table next to the stack of cards lay Talia's phone, plugged into a charger. A new message flashed across the screen. No preview, just a name. My hand hovered over it and then moved away. I did not need any more. I already had more than enough. Still, the small light glowed against the dark and made my mouth taste bitter. I wrote the last name on the last card and placed it in the box. Then I washed my hands and whispered good night to the sleeping room and stepped into the hallway with my bag. In the elevator I texted Priya and thanked her again for all she was doing. I said I would be in first thing in the morning with the final slideshow and the printed vows. She sent back a thumbs up and a smile. She added that she would have the AV tech on site at 9 and that if I wanted to run anything early it would be easy. I closed my eyes and saw the red light of the mic again. I saw the relaxed curve of Talia's mouth as she slept in her robe. I saw the way Ethan's name looked with a single letter. The night before the wedding. The calendar had been walking toward this square for weeks and now my foot was on it. When I got home the apartment felt like an empty stage before the audience arrives. I turned on one lamp. I made tea and did not drink it. I opened my laptop and pulled up my folder. I clicked through files not to rewatch them, but to make sure each one opened cleanly and had a proper copy somewhere else. I checked the drive and the mirror folder on the cloud, and the email drafts that contained nothing in the subject line and attachments only I could recognize. I checked the silent timer I had set for myself. Then I checked the second timer that would grab my hand if I hesitated and shove it forward. I checked the quiet message that would go out if my phone battery died. I checked the envelope on my coffee table with 3 names on it and a note inside that only said please read this in private. I checked the memory card in the tiny case with the yellow sticker and slid it back into my wallet. It was a ritual. Kept my mind from dissolving. At 1:07 a.m. my phone buzzed. A new voice memo had landed in my shared folder from a source who did not know they were a source. It was from a public place where whispering never sounds like whispering on a recording. It held one line that was small but heavy. We will figure it out after the wedding. I listened once. Then I placed it where it belonged and closed the lid of my laptop. I walked to the window and rested my forehead against the cool glass. The city below was a quilt of sodium lights and empty streets and one siren far away. I tried to imagine the face I would wear tomorrow. Calm, bright, supportive. I pictured myself hand to the veil, smoothing it into place. the kindness in that gesture and the truth that lived just under it. I pictured Grant at the end of the aisle and I thought about the letter with his name on it. I thought about the sound a room makes when the air changes. I will not pretend there was no part of me that wanted to leave the whole thing alone. There is a version of this story where I cry in my kitchen and tear everything up and say it is not my responsibility. There is a version where I let someone else discover it years later in a way that spreads pain more slowly. There is a version where I tell her quietly, give her a graceful exit, let her keep the story of herself she likes. But then I saw her in my mind as she looked at Ethan in that bar, just a flicker of recognition and satisfaction, and I felt again the cold hand on my heart when I stood in the doorway with a paper bag in my fist and saw the back of her neck and his hands on her hips. She took something from me. Not just a man. She took safety. She made home feel like a place with trapdoors. She did it while I braided her hair and zipped her dress and handed her champagne and told her she was beautiful. She counted on the part of me that loves to be kind more than it loves to be honest. She counted right until she didn't. At 1:29 a.m., another message lit my phone. From her this time. A photo of a hairpin and a caption about second thoughts on the updo. I typed back that the pin was perfect and that she should trust her first instinct. She sent a heart. Then 3 dots appeared and disappeared. Then a final message. Love you. I stared at the words and tried to find the person I would have been 6 months ago, the one who would have answered those 2 words without thinking. She was not here anymore. I typed back love you more and set the phone face down. I packed my bag. Vows. Programs. Backup USB. Small sewing kit. Breath mints. The silk robe she had given me when I said yes to being by her side on her day, which felt like a decade ago. I slipped my wallet in and the case with the yellow sticker disappeared into the side pocket like it had never existed. I stood in the doorway of my place and looked once at the lamp's warm circle on the wall, then switched it off. Before bed I called my mother. I told her I was nervous about my speech. She told me I had always been good with words and that I would be wonderful. She asked if I was doing all right with the wedding so close, if it made me think about my own. I told her I was fine. I told her I was happy for my friend. The lie was so practiced it felt like a truth's shadow, a shape that fits even if it is empty. My mother said she loved me. I said I loved her and that I would call tomorrow when it was all over. When I finally lay down, I placed my phone on the pillow beside me and stared into the dark until the shapes in the room flattened and time lost its edges. Sleep skimmed me and left. The clock on my dresser glowed its small digits. I counted breaths. I counted the hours between now and morning. I did not pray. I did not ask for signs. I only waited until the fear burned out and left something quieter behind. Not peace. Resolve. At 2:41 a.m. my door buzzer sounded. A single tone that cut through the room like a blade. I sat up. No one buzzes at that hour by mistake. I walked barefoot to the intercom and pressed the button. Hello, I said, voice low. Static, then a throat clearing. A man's voice, soft, careful. Sloane? It's Grant. The night held its breath. I did not speak. He tried again. I know it's late. I'm sorry. Are you awake? I pressed the talk button and told him yes. I told him to come up. While the elevator climbed, I went to the sink and filled a glass with water. My hands were steady because this is what they do when the cliff becomes a step and all that is left is to take it. I opened the door as the elevator dinged and stood with the light behind me so he would not see my face too clearly. Grant stepped into the hall, hair messy, tie missing, eyes rimmed red like he had rubbed them hard. He held something in his right hand. He lifted it, not quite sure he should. It was a small envelope. My name on the front in his handwriting. I found something, he said. Or maybe it found me. I don't know. He looked past me and then back down at the envelope like it might tell him what to say next. I don't know who else to ask. A breeze slipped through the window in the stairwell and the building made its small settling noise. I stepped aside and let him in. That was the moment I knew the last piece would fall exactly where I needed it. Not because I planned for him to come. I didn't. I had planned for everything else. But when chance arrived at my door, it walked right into the shape I had carved for it. We sat at my small table. He slid the envelope across to me and said nothing. I did not open it. Not yet. I looked at him instead. Up close, the kindness was still there. Under was something tight and bruised. I told him to take a breath. I told him to start at the beginning. He did. And as he spoke, I realized I had not misjudged him. He was a good man. He was also a man who deserved to know the truth before it was too late to change anything. I placed my hand flat on the envelope. I did not pull it toward me. "Grant," I said quietly, "tomorrow everything changes." He nodded like he had been waiting to hear that sentence in any form. He looked down at his hands. He whispered, "Okay." We did not decide anything else in that moment. We did not need to. The last checks were already ticking forward in my mind. The drive was packed. The files had backups. The timing would not slip. The mask had done its job and their comfort had made them careless. I walked him to the door and he paused there like he might say another thing. He didn't. He stepped into the elevator and the doors closed and I stood alone in the quiet again. In my bedroom I sat on the edge of the bed and set a new alarm for a time even the birds do not trust. I found sleep for 20 minutes that felt like 5. When I opened my eyes, the room was still dark but the day had begun moving toward me. I could feel it. I showered and dried my hair and put on the robe Talia had given me. I looked in the mirror at the face I had practiced. The edges were soft. The center was steel. I picked up my bag. I placed the envelope Grant had left on top of everything else and slid the zipper closed. The night before the wedding, every last detail of my plan rested where it needed to rest. Quiet. Ready. Waiting for a single touch. All that remained was to walk into the day and act like I knew nothing at all. Morning came like a curtain lifting. No fanfare. No thunderclap. Just light on the wall and the soft sound of the city starting its slow spin. I sat on the edge of my bed and let my feet find the floor. For a long moment I did not move. I listened to my breath. Then I stood and began. I showered and dried my hair until it behaved. I let my makeup settle into something soft and bright. The kind people call effortless even though it takes discipline to make your face look like air. I put on a pale dress that moved when I did and a simple gold necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. I checked the bag. Printed vows. Programs. Sewing kit. 2 safety pins. Breath mints. Tide pen. A tiny vial of perfume for the bride. The silk robe she would need. My clutch with a phone at 80%. The case with the yellow sticker slid into the side pocket and vanished under the lining. The small USB drive lay flat in a slim sleeve behind the programs. The envelope Grant had left rested on top like a white stone. I had not opened it. I did not need to yet. It pressed a calm weight against the zipper. I arrived at the venue just as the first staff cars were pulling into the alley. The hall sat inside an old brick building that once stored cotton and salt. Time had mellowed it into something elegant. Arched windows. A high ceiling with exposed beams. Light that fell like clean water. Outside the air smelled like last night's rain and early coffee. Inside it smelled like lemon polish and cool glass. Priya met me at the door with her clipboard. She wore her hair in a loose braid and sneakers with her dark dress. She had kindness in her eyes and a one-track day in her head. She hugged me lightly and asked if I slept. I told her I did. It slid out smooth because I had been practicing lies that look like truths. She led me through the main room, now a cathedral of possibility. Tables waited under white linens like quiet islands. Each place setting sat centered on a circle of glass. Candles in tall cylinders stood unlit. The florist's early work added twigs of eucalyptus and sprays of ivory roses that looked like clouds. Above, strings of lights cut the space into gentle constellations. At the far end, a stage for the band. To the right, a screen hung from a rig and a projector perched on a cart. I felt the smallest tug in my chest when I saw it. Not nerves. Recognition. The tool that would become a blade when I asked it to. We ducked into the AV nook where a tech named Kevin checked cables with quiet patience. He wore a faded t-shirt and carried a roll of gaffer tape on his forearm like a bracelet. Priya introduced us and I told him I had the slideshow for later. He asked for a copy on USB and a backup if I had one. I gave him the one with the reception edit. He slid it into the laptop and nodded at the screen when the files appeared. He clicked play for a moment. Photos of Talia as a kid bounced by. Missing tooth. Birthday hat. A dog with unruly ears. I watched for 3 seconds and then looked away. The sweetness pricked like nettles. He closed the player, ejected the drive and handed it back. "Do you want me to hold it until tonight?" he asked. "I'll keep it safe," I said and returned it to the sleeve. Kept my tone warm. I kept my face open. We checked mics. I spoke into one. My voice ran out across the empty room and came back softer from the far wall. The little red light at the base was steady. I watched it for a second, then turned it off. Kevin taped down a cable. Priya walked me through the ceremony space. The seats would face a simple arbor dressed in greenery and two tall arrangements that looked like they belonged in a quiet chapel. The aisle would be lined with candles in glass cylinders. The light in here would shift with the hour, then settle into gold as the day dropped toward evening. Everything looked gentle and right. It made the storm in me feel private and deliberate. The bridal suite smelled like steam, hairspray, and fresh flowers. Someone had brought a platter of fruit and pastries. Someone else had brought a speaker that whispered a playlist of soft songs that sounded like sunlight. Talia stood at the vanity in a slip with her hair pinned halfway up. Her face turned toward the mirror. When she saw me in the reflection, she smiled. A real one, bright and easy, the kind that had always made rooms forgive her. It flickered for a breath when her eyes met mine. Then it settled. "You are my hero," she said. "You always show up early. What would I do without you?" "Forget your perfume," I said, and lifted the tiny vial from my bag like a magician. "You almost did." She laughed and pressed her hand to her chest in mock scandal. The bridesmaids chimed in with little cheers. I placed the vial on the tray by the mirror and moved to hug her. I let it last for 1 second longer than comfort. My hand felt the cage of her ribs. She was warm and alive and so sure she could keep what she had taken. I hung the robe on a hook and took stock of the room the way a hostess would. Water. Straws for lipstick. Tissues. Bobby pins. I lined everything up. The girls spun chairs. The hairdresser pinned and sprayed. The makeup artist blended and touched the corner of an eye with the gentlest tap. I fetched a different lip color when asked. I located a tiny pair of scissors. I held a phone for a photo. All the while, I kept my mind on the path that ran under the surface of this day like a current. My phone lived in my clutch. It sat on the low table with the envelope and a folded note. I had written it on heavy paper the night before, my handwriting neat and calm. On the front it said a name. On the first line inside it said, "Please read this alone." I had made 3. 1 for Grant. 1 for his mother. 1 for Talia's father. They were not threats. They were not warnings. They were small doors. I would open them only if the rest failed. To look at them was to feel steadier. At 10, Ethan texted to say he was on his way to the venue. He added a joke about tuxedos that did not fit and attached a photo of his tie draped over a chair. We had not seen each other in 2 days. He ended the message with a heart. My mouth tasted dry. I replied with a thumbs up and a line about saving me a seat on the groom's side so I could tease him during the vows. I added an extra smile emoji to make it look like a joke between people who tell each other everything. I put the phone face down and breathed through it. Talia slipped into her dress just before noon. The satin fell over her like a secret. The buttons ran in a neat spine down her back. I fastened each one with a loop and a push. My fingers moved without a tremor. On the last one at the small of her back, she shivered as if the air had cooled. "Cold hands," she said and smiled at me in the mirror like we were sharing something sweet. I smiled back. My hands were warm. We placed the veil. I slid the comb into the soft nest of pins and tucked 2 bobby pins crossed like a tiny gate to hold it secure. I let the veil fall to her shoulders and then lifted it again to keep it clean until the walk. She looked at herself and tears collected, making her eyes brighter. "You did it," she said. "You made me a bride." "You did that yourself," I said. I smoothed the waist with the side of my hand. "I just helped with the buttons." There is a special cruelty in telling the truth to someone who thinks you are lying and lying to someone who thinks you are telling the truth. That is what the mask is for. It protects both. Keeps you safe long enough to do what must be done. Around 1, the photographer arrived with a second shooter. They set up soft boxes in the hallway and directed us like dancers. Laughter echoed in frames. I placed the hem just so. I accepted a bouquet of ranunculus from a girl with a nervous smile and adjusted the ribbon. I watched the photographer coax Talia into postures that made light curve around her. She was good at being looked at. She always had been. The lens loved her. It swallowed her whole and made her seem even more delicate than she was. Grant texted from the groom's suite to ask if the schedule was on time. I replied that we were a few minutes ahead and that he could breathe. He sent a thank you and a line about his hands shaking. He added a small heart. Not a romantic one. A grateful one. I felt it land. I did not open the envelope. It waited where I could touch it with a finger and not look down. The hallway between the suites opened onto a small balcony where the air moved and the sounds from the street rose and faded. As I stepped out for a second of quiet, someone followed me. Ethan. He closed the door behind him with a gentle hand. He looked good in black and white. It had always suited him. He leaned against the brick and let his eyes rest on my face like we belonged to the same secret. You look beautiful, he said. You always do. Thanks, I said. I placed my palms on the railing and kept my gaze on the street. You clean up well. He moved to stand beside me. Close enough that the scent of his cologne reached me. The same cologne from the bedroom. My throat closed and then let go. He spoke like a man who believes the room will always forgive him. Are you doing okay with all this? He asked. I know weddings can be hard. Why would they be hard? I asked. I turned to him with a small smile that had no weight. It is a happy day. He studied me as if I were a puzzle with one piece missing. You are amazing, he said. I do not know how you do it. Always there for everyone. I let the line hang between us like a string. Then I cut it with a nod and a small laugh. Go be a respectable guest, I said. They need you for photos. He reached as if to touch my arm and then thought better of it. He looked toward the hall. He hesitated, then said almost lightly, You know I love you, right? I did not answer that. I did not say no or yes. I did not give him anything he could fold and put in his pocket. I said, They are waiting, and lifted my chin toward the door. He left. The closed door clicked like a metronome. I counted 3 beats before I let my shoulders drop. The ceremony time came on quiet feet. Guests began to arrive in glints of color and silk in dark suits and polished shoes. The foyer filled with the sound of greetings and the careful joy of people who hope this day will be simple. I moved through them with a smile and a clear voice. I greeted Grant's mother by name. I hugged Talia's aunt. I introduced cousins to co-workers with a line about how the bride glowed even brighter the closer she got to the aisle. People thanked me for helping. They told me I should be a planner. I accepted compliments as if they weighed nothing. In the background, staff lit the candles. In the background, the string quartet tuned and slid into a soft prelude. In the background, I watched the machine of the day start to hum. The projector slept. The mics lined up with fresh batteries. The laptop sat with its lid closed like a patient animal. I slipped into the groom's suite for a moment and found Grant standing with his best man. He looked like a boy who had walked too far in new shoes. I asked for a second alone with him, and the best man stepped out to the hall without question. Grant and I faced each other in the small room where a suit bag hung empty on a hook. Are you ready? I asked. He ran his thumb along the edge of his cufflink and nodded. Mostly. I opened my clutch and placed the folded note with his name into his hand. If you need this later, use it, I said. If you do not, throw it away. No one else needs to read it but you. He did not unfold it. He tucked it inside his jacket pocket and looked at me with a question I did not let him ask. I touched his sleeve like a sister would and told him he was kind and steady and that kindness is not a weakness. He swallowed and nodded. I left before we could say anything that would make us both smaller. Back in the bridal suite, Talia paced a little to burn the energy. The dress moved with her like water. I held the veil so it did not drag. A bridesmaid handed me a lipstick and asked for an opinion. I gave it without looking at my reflection. The photographer took a few last frames and then the coordinator called us to line up. The processional order folded around us like scaffolding. Flower girl first. Then the small line of friends who would flank the couple while they spoke into the circle of everyone they knew. I stepped back to take my place. Talia squeezed my fingers and breathed out a trembling laugh that might have been joy. I lifted the veil over her head and let it fall. Her face blurred a little. She looked at herself in the long mirror as if it were a window that could show her what came next. She turned to me and said, Stay close. I will, I said. The truth inside the lie felt like a wire. The music shifted. The doors opened on the far end of the hall and a hush moved through the guests like a tide pulling back. The flower girl stepped into the aisle and scattered white petals like small clouds falling. The bridesmaids followed in their soft dresses, each the color of dawn in a different part of the sky. I moved with them, then peeled off to the side where I would stand in that helper's position just out of the photographs. The place where hands can reach for a tissue, a pin, a breath. The room looked different with everyone in it. The light held its breath. The candles made a trembling glow that drew the eye toward the arbor. Grant stood there with the officiant, a minister with a kind face. He looked toward the doors as they opened again. He looked the way men look when hope is standing in front of them and they are trying not to grip it too tightly. Talia appeared. The room sighed as one body. She started down the aisle on her father's arm. He looked proud and a little lost. She looked like a promise. I watched faces tilt. I watched the groom's mouth shape into something like prayer. I watched 3 people carefully. Grant, Talia, Ethan, seated at the end of an aisle 3 rows back on the right. His eyes touched her and then moved across the crowd as if seeking a signal. When they slid past me, I gave him nothing. I tracked the veil with my hands in a habit of precision. If it caught, I would lift it. If a petal clung to the satin, I would sweep it with a fingertip. The quartet moved from one melody to the next. The notes rose and settled on the beams like small birds. At the front, Talia's father lifted the veil and kissed her cheek. He placed her hand in Grant's. For a second her face was luminous with something close to awe. It might have been the joy of the moment. It might have been the thrill of success. The mind will tell you what you want to hear when it is dressed in white. They took their places. The officiant spoke the first lines in that soft tone designed to make even skeptics feel safe. Welcome, family and friends. We are gathered. He talked about love as a daily act. He told a story about the couple I did not recognize. People smiled at the right places. A baby somewhere made a small sound and then quieted. The air in the room felt as thin as a held breath. I stood to the side with my bag at my feet and my hands relaxed. My phone lay inside the clutch, screen dim. The small USB in the sleeve had already fulfilled its public duty. My other one had a different job. The memory card with the yellow sticker weighted against the stitching where I could reach it without looking. The folded notes rested under the phone. Everything near. Everything simple. The officiant called for the readings. A friend of Grant's stepped up to a mic and read a piece about patience and kindness. A cousin read a poem that sounded like a secret told on a quiet morning. The words smoothed the edges of the time we now inhabited. They made the day feel universal. This is the trick of ritual. It invites you to walk in a groove worn by thousands of feet and believe you are the first. Then we came to the border I had known was coming the way the body knows when a storm is near. The place where vows move from idea to spoken promise. The officiant smiled at both of them and said in that calm voice that the couple would now share the promises they had written. He nodded to me in a small queue we had arranged for the paper exchange. I moved forward 2 steps, lifted the printed cards from my bag and placed one in each waiting hand. My fingers did not brush theirs. I stepped back to my place. The moment stretched. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I could hear the faint shuffle of a shoe on the floor 4 rows back. I could hear the quartet hold a note until it landed like a feather on a windowsill. This is what a boiling point feels like. Not violence. Density. Everything close together. Everything ready. I had timed my body to the rhythm of this service in the way you time your stride to stairs you climb every day. I knew how long the officiant took between lines. I knew the movement of his eyes when he looked down at his book. I knew the way a room feels when it senses an approach but does not yet understand its shape. I looked at Grant first. His hands held the card like it contained a cure. I looked at Talia. Her mouth curved in the small smile she gives when she is pleased with herself. The veil's edge lifted in a tiny breeze from the air vent above. The candles trembled. My heart pounded in my chest like something trying to get out. It was not fear. It was the body's way of clearing the path. I saw Ethan shift in his chair. He leaned forward a fraction and then caught himself. He sat back again and tried to look like any other guest. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the program against his thigh once, twice, then stilled. He did not know what would happen. He only knew something had entered the room. The officiant turned to Talia. He asked if she would like to go first. She nodded. She lifted her chin. She drew a breath. The room leaned in as one. Each person present offered their listening like a gift. This is the tenderness of a gathering. It lets itself be vulnerable to a stranger's story because it wants to believe it is about love. I stepped forward. It was the smallest movement. A single pace toward the center aisle. A hand loosely at my side. The other hand brushed the edge of the clutch so I could feel the memory card against my skin. The world sharpened. The sound of my heartbeat eased into a steady drum. The faces in front of me cleared. I reached a point where someone might think I was only adjusting my view. I went one step beyond that point and someone in the fourth row turned their head. If the room was a lake, a ripple had begun to spread. It had not yet reached the far shore, but it would. It always does. My smile found its place. Not cruel. Not kind. A simple thing to steady a moment. I did not look at Ethan. I did not look at Talia. I let my eyes meet the officiant's just long enough for him to understand that something required his attention. He took a breath to say something. He did not. He waited. I felt each finger in my hand. I felt the ground through the thin sole of my shoe. I felt the small weight of the case with the yellow sticker like a coin against my palm. Before the vows, I said, and my voice carried without strain to every corner of the room, there is something the couple should see. Silence opened like a door. The cliff was in front of me. There was no more staircase. Only air and gravity and the exact distance between now and the breakthrough. I took the last step forward. The air in the room changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of shift you feel in your bones before your brain can catch up. Like the first tremor before an earthquake. Every eye turned toward me. I kept my voice calm. Before the vows, I repeated, there's something the couple should see. The officiant looked startled, his gaze darting between me and the bride and groom. Talia's lips curved into the tiniest brittle smile, the one she used when she thought she could charm her way through anything. Grant's brows pulled together, the confusion in his eyes already cracking into something sharper. I bent slightly, lifted my clutch from the floor and held it like it was just part of my outfit. My hand found the USB sleeve without looking. The little drive slid between my fingers. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, the way it gets when you've already crossed the line in your mind 100 times before. Kevin. I called to the AV tech, my voice bright like I was about to announce a surprise slideshow of baby photos. Can you put this up for me? The man hesitated, looking to Priya, who was already stepping forward from the side aisle. She knew my role today. She'd seen me at every planning meeting. She must have thought this was something Talia had approved. She waved Kevin on. I walked toward the front, heels tapping softly on the polished floor. Each step made the silence denser. When I reached the laptop, I handed him the drive. This is, he asked under his breath. Exactly what needs to be seen right now, I murmured. The first image hit the screen a heartbeat later. It was a photo I'd taken outside the Riverside Hotel. Ethan, baseball cap pulled low, emerging from the side exit. 10 minutes later, another shot, Talia, hair tucked under a scarf, slipping out alone. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The next image, a screenshot of a text from Ethan to Talia. You taste like sin. Can't stop thinking about last night. Someone gasped loud enough for the whole room to hear. The slideshow kept rolling. Photos of them at the bar where they thought no one noticed, their heads leaned too close. Ride-share receipts. Hotel confirmations. A late-night voice memo with Talia whispering just one more time. No one will ever know. Turn it off. Talia's voice cracked like glass. She half turned toward Kevin, veil trembling as she moved. This is fake. It's... Grant's hand dropped from hers. Fake. His voice was low, dangerous. That's your voice. The guests were no longer trying to whisper. They were hissing questions, leaning toward each other, eyes darting from the screen to the couple. Talia's father stood, his face pale, jaw tight. Her mother covered her mouth with both hands. And Ethan, seated in his neat suit, jaw rigid, looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. He didn't stand. He didn't move. He just stared at me, a flicker of something between rage and desperation in his eyes. This isn't what it looks like, Talia said, stepping toward Grant, reaching for his arm. Baby, listen. He jerked away so hard she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the arbor. Don't call me that. His voice was louder now, carrying over the stunned quiet. How long? She shook her head, tears already threatening her makeup. It was a mistake. The screen behind them showed another text. I wish she wasn't in the picture. We'd be perfect together. Grant's face went still. He looked straight at me. And in that moment, everyone understood exactly who she was. The noise in the room rose. Chairs scraping, guests shifting, mutters turning into outrage. Someone in the back shouted, "Have some shame." Another voice, "Unbelievable." Talia turned back toward me then, eyes wide, voice trembling. Why are you doing this? You're supposed to be my friend. I took one slow step closer, keeping my voice level. I was your friend. Right up until you decided my fiancé looked better in your bed. Gasps. A ripple of shock. Even people who'd suspected something hadn't expected me to say it outright. Grant's mother stood now, shaking her head. This is disgusting, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. The chaos was complete now. Some guests were standing, others were pulling out phones, a few were already walking toward the doors. The officiant looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. And in the middle of it all, Talia reached for me like we could still fix this, like I could somehow stop the bleeding she'd caused. Please, she whispered, we can talk about this after. I tilted my head just enough for her to see the smile that didn't reach my eyes. After? You were hoping I'd watch you marry him and smile for the photos. She flinched like the words were physical. Grant took a step back from her, his hand going to the pocket where I knew the folded note was. He didn't open it here. He didn't need to. The truth was already burning the day down around them. You don't get to explain this away, he said, voice low but shaking. We're done. Right now. Talia swayed like she might fall, and for a split second I thought she would. Ethan finally stood then, but not to help her. He was making his way toward the side aisle, eyes on the floor, moving fast. Coward. The final slide came up on the screen. A photo of Talia and Ethan together, laughing, faces close, timestamped just 6 weeks ago. I walked toward my clutch, plucked the USB from Kevin's hand and slipped it away. Then I turned back to the room, meeting the gaze of anyone who was still looking at me. I think that's enough vows for today, I said simply. Grant walked out first. His mother followed, then half the grooms sighed, their footsteps echoing in the stunned space. The bride's side fractured, some staying with her, others leaving in tight-lipped silence. Talia stood frozen, hands trembling at her sides, veil slipping sideways. Her lipstick had smudged, her eyes wide and wet. She looked nothing like the glowing bride from an hour ago. I picked up my bag, smoothed my dress and walked down the aisle, past her, past the crumbling arch of flowers, past the guests who parted without a word. As I reached the doors I glanced back just once. She was staring at me, mouth open like she might beg again. I gave her the smallest smile, polite, almost sympathetic, and stepped outside into the bright, clean air. The air outside the venue was cooler than I expected. Not cold, just that clean, sharp kind of air that feels like it's been rinsed. I stood on the steps for a moment, letting the voices from inside fade into a dull, muffled hum. The sky was a perfect, indifferent blue. Grant's mother was standing a few feet away, phone in hand, speaking in low, clipped tones to someone I couldn't hear. When she saw me, she ended the call and walked over. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say sorry. She just nodded once, like we both understood that sometimes truth costs more than anyone wants to pay, and walked past me toward the waiting cars. By that evening, the story had already started to travel. Not the whole truth, just the jagged edges people had picked up from whispers and phone calls. Screenshots of the slideshow were floating around group chats. Someone had even uploaded a short, shaky clip to Instagram before the venue staff stopped them. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. Silence was better. Silence lets people fill in the blanks however they want, and they almost always make the story worse in their heads. 3 days later I got a text from Grant. You didn't have to do that for me, he wrote. But I'm glad you did. He asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I said no. Not because I was angry at him, but because this wasn't a friendship I wanted to build from wreckage. He deserved to start clean. A week after that, I heard through a mutual friend that the wedding deposits had been refunded to him, minus the non-refundable venue fee. He kept the apartment they'd chosen together. She moved back in with her parents. As for Ethan, we didn't speak again. A month later I passed him on the street. He saw me, opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again. That was the last time I saw his face up close. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need an explanation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a scream. It's the echo of your footsteps as you walk away, knowing they'll never get the sound out of their heads. Talia didn't just lose the wedding. She lost her job 2 months later. Apparently, one of her company's senior managers had been a guest that day, and didn't think someone with such a reputation was a good face for the brand. The irony? It wasn't about morality. It was about optics. The same charm that had always saved her couldn't cover the fact that everyone in that room had seen. People sometimes ask if I regret it. No. It wasn't about destroying her. It was about taking back the power she thought she'd stolen. It was about letting her know, without a single doubt, that I saw her for what she really was. And maybe most importantly, it was about teaching myself that I'm stronger than I thought. If you've been listening this far, you know betrayal has a way of hollowing you out. But if you're lucky and careful, you can fill that space with something sharper. Not hate. Not bitterness. Just a clear understanding of who you are and what you will never allow again. So tell me, would you have gone this far? Or do you think I should have done more? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our family of people who believe betrayal deserves a reckoning. Like this video if you felt that moment when the mask came off, and share your own story below. Because sometimes the sweetest silence is the one you leave behind.